Hey everybody, this is Brian Aiello. On episode number 62 of Origin Stories on Creativity, I spoke with Nancy Quinn. She wrote her first novel, a memoir about moving from Washington, D.C. to a mountain in Montana. She's a neat person. She became law enforcement at the age of 19. Fresh water and game law enforcement. I can't remember the exact title that she used, unfortunately. But, I mean, that's interesting. She lived in, or she worked actually in my old county of Pasco, where I grew up as a kid, which, if you're familiar with Florida, that means rattlesnakes, water moccasins, alligators, sharks, all types of dangerous animals. She says she has a panther that likes to hang out on her kid's swing set. She's got, I'm going to add that picture to the graphic for the show. She's not afraid of grizzly bears at all, knocking on her door and asking to dig through her trash. That's grizzly country up there. You know, the farmers are constantly looking for constantly waiting for them to show up so that they can shoot them in the face so they'll stop eating their sheep. It takes a lot of guts to do what she's doing, go out there in the country, and she's doing it. And that's what her novel's about. That's what her memoir's about. And that's what her second one's going to be about as well. She was married to an Air Force man, and now they're both out there in the middle of nowhere raising kids to add to it. It's a fantastic story. She's written a book about it. She's writing a second book about it as well. She's also a wildlife artist, and I'm going to put links to that in the show notes. I'm going to put links to her Twitter, Facebook, and her website as well. Check her out. It's well worth it. This is a great conversation, and with no further ado, here's Nancy Quinn.
Originally, I'm a Detroit gal, and then spent a good portion of my childhood in Florida. I started in Jacksonville, all over the state, Tallahassee, Miami, and in between.
I grew up in Pasco County on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, that was actually one of the counties that I covered when I was in conservation law enforcement. So I'm familiar with Pasco County.
Oh, interesting. What did you do in conservation law enforcement in Pasco County?
Well, I was a duty officer for, at that time, it was called the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission.
Yeah, I know them.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't have any run-ins with them, but I might have known you guys.
Yeah, I did law enforcement work for about 3 years. In fact, I was the youngest woman they had ever hired.
It's interesting. When did you serve with that institution? Maybe I was living in that area then.
Let's see, now let me think. I got hired on when I was 19 years old.
Wow.
And
that is young
in
to
a
do
couple
law
of days,
enforcement.
I was really young, yeah. And in a couple of days, I'm going to be 55. So you can imagine how long ago that was.
I would have been a kid. Yeah, you're about 15 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I was right on the Gulf. So the Pithicoathy River was a mainstay for me in terms of recreation. When I was a kid, my mom bought a canoe, so we were constantly out there. We used to do a lot of, we used to play out in the Gulf a lot. There was a little island that we used to camp on. And I hate to admit this to a former cop, but we used to raid crab traps all the time. We used to load the bottom of the canoe up with crab and just go out there and have like cookouts. We used to camp out on people's shacks and just fish all night long and just have huge campouts in that little tiny island out there. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about or not.
Actually, I don't know the particular one, but your scenario is very familiar. And I can even tell you, I would never name names, but some of the very best officers did things like you did when they were young. And we used to make jokes about how the outlaws, made some of the best officers later in life. So There you go.
Still, man, I have some of the best memories. Unfortunately, now I think back on it though, because of, you know, you hear stories of people going out into the Gulf and just not coming back again. And I was in a little tiny rickety canoe. You know what I mean? And it's like me and my brother would go out to the coral reef out there and just tie up our canoe on a cement block and throw it in there and just enjoy the day and come back with no problems. But people are out there on motorboats just not coming back. It's like, how do we survive? It's like PTSD city.
Well, you got to wonder. I did do a few search and rescues. Some of them ended well, and some of them did not. So, yeah, there, one little thing has to go wrong, and then the domino effect comes into play, and then you're in trouble.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, in terms of motorboats too, I mean, you flip one of those things, it's like you can't just swim after a motorboat that's flipped. It's done. You can't flip it back over again. What brought you out to Montana? Because I mean, you have like the best cowgirl name in the entire world, Nancy Quinn. I want you to be like a sheriff out there with a gun on your side, righting wrongs. I'm Nancy Quinn. It's like the best.
Well, I don't right the wrongs anymore. I guess in that regard, I'm kind of past that. But I suppose I write them now with the art that I have done and with the words that I write. So I'm probably the same mindset. I'm just doing it in a different way.
Uh-huh. What do you write Western literature?
Yes, I'm actually a new author. So I just have this one book out. The sequel is on the way. And
Go West, Young Woman is your book out right now,
that's the
right?
book that's out now. Yeah. And hopefully the sequel will be forthcoming in a while. I'm knee deep in editing right now. But yes, I do write about basically our true life story here. We left Washington, D.C. My husband retired from the Air Force, and we wanted a different way of life, and we certainly got it. It was quite a culture shock, but I write about our experiences of learning how to live on a rural mountain, which is very different from living in any other state that isn't nearly as wild or living in a neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, you guys got to deal with some pretty outrageous stuff up there. Bear and wolves and I mean, the bear, I have nightmares about bear. Bear just scare me to death. I mean, is that something that you think about on a daily basis, or have you dealt with the wildlife situation up there? Or how do you deal with that?
Well, we deal with it almost daily, really. It's always in the back of your mind. And we have we have instances where we'll have a lot of bear activity, and then we'll have spells where you don't really hear about it, but it doesn't mean they're not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're always kind of vigilant and prepared. We don't live in fear, but we're
I'm in New
certainly.
Jersey now, and I live in fear.
You
I,
have two predators there.
I've heard that New Jersey has one of the highest populations of black bear in the entire country. I don't know if that's true or not. I heard it on Joe Rogan, which is not like the font of information on black bear or whatever, but I'm dumping trash and thinking that to myself. I'm like, there could be a black bear in this dumpster. And you live in Montana and you have the brown bear there. I mean, those are nasty creatures.
The grizzly bears are they're pretty aggressive,
Yeah.
and you have to be very careful of them. The ranchers that live around me, of course, they always have cattle, and when the calves are born, it's almost like the buffet is open for some of these, the predators, and so they get the wolves and the coyotes and the bears, and they come right in and will try to attack the smaller ones, the smaller newborn animals. So yeah, they're around, and we've had some neighbors lose horses to them, which is very frightening. And so we just, you just have to keep your eyes open
Yeah.
and be ready.
What has been the most culture shocking moment of your move to rural Montana? if not the animals, or even if it is the animals, I'd love to hear more stories. I mean, obviously you are an animal connoisseur with your art.
Right. I actually have a lot of experience at handling all different kinds of wild animals, from leopards and tigers and, lots of exotic types, domestic types of wildlife. But you're right. Probably one of the things that was very different here was weather. Weather is not your friend. And you have to always be careful in keeping an eye on the weather when wintertime sets in. Like you said, the wild animals, we've had several kinds of encounters, and we've learned from each one. There was a steep learning curve to living up here in such a rural setting. It's been worth it, and we enjoy it. There's a lot of cultural differences here. They don't have a lot of the finer aspects of life that I'm used to, I suppose, like theater and restaurants and shopping and things. But it's a trade-off.
Hmm.
And some of those things are still accessible, just not the way I'm used to them. So yeah, there was a lot to get used to,
But
and it's been quite a ride.
you have a YouTube channel, I see, and you do some cooking on it. And when I was growing up, my grandmother was huge into the canning. She's Appalachian. She's West Virginian, coal mining. Family stretched back in that area from God, the Revolutionary War, basically. You know, old timey living on the land type situations. Have you gotten into that, or have you always been type of the planning for the future culinarily?
To be honest, I don't do canning.
No, you don't.
It's I don't. It's a tremendous amount of work for me,
Oh
and
yeah,
the
I've
time.
watched her do it, boiling this and sealing that and making sure this is clean and not getting botulism or whatever you get. I don't know. You don't want to die.
And you can, yeah, you
Yeah.
can become very sick if you don't do it correctly, which is another reason why it's been a bit of a deterrent. But I don't have the time to invest in that. What I did with the videos for the little cooking and baking, those are just a handful of recipes that are already in the back of my book. And so part of our Western lifestyle is I've enjoyed getting into the kitchen, and I create my own recipes by experimenting. So I went ahead and put a few recipes in the back of the book simply because I referenced and talked about them in the book. And I thought, well, if someone hears me talking about a particular recipe, they might be interested in it. So I enclosed it in the back. And I just demonstrated those few. I'm not really trying to do a cooking channel. It's just more related to our whole Western experience.
How long have you been living up there?
We've been here about 10 years now.
Oh, 10 years. So you're not new to the area at all. How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me about a year and a half to write the book. And then it took me about a year and a half to find a publisher for it.
Oh, so you're traditionally published.
I am with Hellgate Press.
Oh, fantastic. Um, what per so you took a year and a half to write the book, and then how long before Hellgate discovered that you had a book worthy of publishing? Did you go through an agent, or how did that whole process kind of start? I did not start my timer.
Okay, are we doing the interview without taping it? Is that what you're saying?
No, I started the broadcast as soon as we got on the phone
Oh, okay.
or the Hangouts. I just didn't. I like to kind of start the timer to see how long we've been going. I guess about 12 minutes, but when did you get an agent?
I went ahead and sent out queries to both agents and to different publishing houses. And I decided to see which one would be interested in what I do. So, to be honest, I didn't have a lot of luck with the agents. Some of
Yeah, me
them either
either.
just, yeah, some of them just ignored my query, or to be honest, I got a couple of replies that I was actually surprised at at the attitude behind it. And I thought, well,
In what
I'm
way?
just going to wait. Well, some of them were. were rather rude in their reply, which I was surprised because I thought you never even read the book, so I don't know how you can have such a quick opinion about it. But I imagine they go through lots of different queries at times and maybe get a little inundated or overwhelmed.
A lot of my
But
queries just like disappeared into the black hole of nothing. I was like, I didn't exist. I mean, my thinking is you have to have an audience before they'll even pay attention to you. And it's really great that Hellgate jumped on you. I mean, they a big press, or are they kind of a smaller situation?
I would say that they're probably medium-sized. I don't necessarily consider them a real small press, but of course they're certainly not like Penguin or Schuster or one of the really big ones. And to be honest, there is a lot of advantages to having a smaller mid-sized company to work with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really pleased with the partnership that we've created and the idea that we can really work together. And I do keep a lot of my autonomy in the ideas that I present and how things are going. So it's nice that we can share a vision as well as offer each other suggestions, bounce some things back and forth. And in the end, between the two of us, I think we come up with something really wonderful that people will want to know about and read about. And we have something great to offer.
Well, that's fantastic. And they're pushing you and helping you and guiding you into your second book as well?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to present the second book. Normally what I do is I send a really polished product to them so that they're not spending a lot of time on editing. Of course, they go through and they'll find something that I missed. And I want our time mostly to be spent on the presentation of the cover and how the book looks and the whole package of it. And I would rather we spend our time on that than have them pick through all of my writing and say, do this again or do that again. So I spend a lot of time on getting it really just the way I want it before they even see it.
As an artist, yeah, I can imagine the visual medium of the cover would appeal to you. Did you take the photo?
My husband actually took the photo, and it is from our front porch. We have some really amazing views. I did a YouTube.
I'm jealous. So jealous of what you have up there. But man, it's just the idea of opening my front door and just being this gigantic 2-ton brown monstrosity going, and just I'm a city boy. I don't know. I have dreams of owning a farm. I just don't know if I could do the wild animal thing.
Well, you can actually homestead in other parts of the country that don't have the kind of wildlife that we do. And your concern will be about the deer eating your crops and things like that. But
do you have a deer up there? You have elk, don't you?
We have elk, we have deer, and I do have a small greenhouse because the deer will come in and eat everything. They love my flowers. It's very hard to have a flower garden or anything like that.
Is that the only solution as a greenhouse?
It really is. You can purchase some of the deer resistant types of plants, but to be honest, in the wintertime, the poor things, there's not a lot of food. So I don't mind if they come into the garden and chew up the branches. In the spring, it'll go ahead and bloom again. And so we've just learned to kind of live together in harmony in that respect. And they're so used to being around the yard now. They bring the fawns in, the little spotted fawns, and it's so sweet. I'll look out my window and they're 10 feet from my window in the garden, just browsing.
Can you hunt them from your property?
And my husband hunts only, of course, during the hunting season.
Oh, there's hunting seasons up in Montana too?
Oh, yes. And we don't really hunt very often. I think the whole time we've been here, he's gone out once. So we're not big hunters. Our neighbors are, and that's fine. But
that's something I would try. I would love to eat the meat that I would procure myself. I think that would be interesting.
Well, we've had deer. Yeah, we've had deer and elk. Some people eat bear. Personally, I'm not really interested in trying that.
It's gamey, I hear.
Well, some people like it, and I guess I'm just used to going to the grocery store and getting my hamburger all ground up for me in a package. But a lot
Well,
of people
how is
process their own meat here too.
how is the winter for you in terms of being able to, oh, I'm out of flour, or oh, I'm out of butter, or some other kind of necessity to cook dinner? Are you able to run to the grocery store? Are you able to get to places that you need to get? I mean, how rural is your homestead?
Well, I would say we're probably about 30 or 40 minutes from a grocery store. So we usually go into town and try to do all of our errands in one day and load up on everything we need. So you're right. If I happen to be in the middle of a recipe and find out I'm out of flour, I'm out of luck for a day or two until we decide to go shopping. You just don't jump in the car and have the convenience of it right around the corner. But with proper planning, you're fine. Now, the winters can be a little difficult. We have quite a bit of plowing to do to get down the mountain to the main highway. And there are times we've been snowed in, or when the weather's bad, we change our plans and stay home.
Uh-huh. I mean, you really have to be on the plowing too, because one day of not plowing can yield to not being able to plow, right? You can get
That's very true. My husband, when the storm comes, usually plows anywhere from maybe 3 to 5, 6 times a day to make sure the road stays clear.
that's
And we have a problem with ice sometimes, so we always have gravel here. We do have our own tractor with a big plow on it, so we are able to spread gravel if we need to get out over the ice. It's labor intensive in the winters. I won't sugarcoat any of that. And it's a whole new way of living through the winters. Where we used to live, either the city shut down with an inch of snow, or
yeah.
they came in and plowed for you.
And they plowed it
And
right up
here,
onto your car too. I mean, I know New York City, they're horrible. You have a mound of snow
they
blocking
do.
your car, and yeah, it's horrible. And my dad was a retired major in the Army, and I did my time in the Army too. So I know that, being ex-military, your husband's on top of it. He likes it.
We have a plan,
Yeah.
and we're always sort of making jokes about living up here and the animals, um, trying to take on a military family, because we we always have a plan, and then we have a plan B. So I feel like we're pretty prepared. And like I said, it was a learning curve, but now we're into a routine that we know what to expect and we know what to do. So it's been a lot easier these last few years.
What did you do? I know you said law enforcement. Were you always in law enforcement prior to moving out there to
No,
the
I
boonies of?
I wasn't. I left law enforcement when I was 23 years old, and I started my own business in wildlife art. So it was kind of an interesting transition, because when I was working in conservation law enforcement, I had a lot of access to very interesting types of animals. Like I mentioned, the tigers and the leopards and things, exotic animals that were just once in a lifetime experiences. So I was always drawing them or painting them. And everyone kept saying, "Why are you still doing this job when you could be making a living at your art?" It was a valid question, but I was pretty young and I wasn't sure if that was something I could really go out and make a living at.
Yeah, a lot of people
But
would
in
dream
time,
of making a living with their art.
you're right. And in time, after about 3 years of midnight shifts and really starting to feel a little bit tired and burned out, especially at such a young age,
And a hard
I thought,
job. Law enforcement's not easy. It can burn you out really fast.
it's not easy and it's stressful. And I worked a lot of midnight shifts, and so it does, after a while, it takes a toll on you. I loved it. I thought I was doing something very important, and I felt really good about the contribution that I was making. But in time, the art was always there for me. It was there for me when I was a child. It was there for me in my growing up years. I was always working on it and I enjoyed it. And I thought, okay, it's time to make a transition and go ahead and give it a try. So I was fortunate. I did really well in my first couple of years out, and I won 2 prestigious awards. And so that opened a lot of doors for me. And I was able to make a living as a wildlife artist and have for some, oh goodness, almost 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made another transition into becoming an author because I felt like I had not only an important story to tell, because it's educational in a sense that you can learn from my mistakes, and I don't mind you having a laugh at my expense. I wrote the book to kind of entertain and educate in that way, but it's a fun story and it's really inspiring, and I wanted to inspire other people to say, see, you can achieve your dream too, and even if it's not mine and you don't want to live this way, with a lot of hard work and getting back up from your setbacks, you can achieve what you want as well. Because a lot of people come out west and after a year or 2, they pack up and go back.
It's really intriguing. There was a gentleman who, World War II was happening and he wanted to join the Navy and he couldn't because of some kind of heart disease. So he ended up moving to Alaska and working in tandem with the Navy, doing mechanic stuff, this, that, and the other thing. Because he had heart disease, he kept himself really, really fit. His name is escaping me. He did a documentary, wrote a book, this, that, and the other thing. Ended up moving into the into the rural countryside and filmed himself. Did one of these documentation. What do they call it? My mind is. I'm 40 years old, and I swear my mind is going. He filmed himself as he built his log cabin and hunted and fished. And do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't, but I don't know in particular, but I've heard of a few similar stories like that. And you're right. It's basically a documentary about their own lives.
Yeah. And this guy's amazing. Nobody's going to live like this guy. He went out there with a saw. He, moved things slowly to his land. And who in their right mind is going to live like that, except vicariously through his experiences? People are going to live vicariously through your experiences as well. I mean, yeah, they might pack a suitcase or say, you know what, kids, me and dad are going to move to Montana because Nancy Quinn did so too, or they're just going to continue living in their suburban lives, eating bonbons and looking forward to your second book so they don't have to. You're doing a great service to mankind because not everybody can live on a mountain in Montana,
Well, you certainly can't if you have a traditional type of job where you have to go to work 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And definitely having work that allows me to live here too is one of the reasons why I'm able to do what I do. But again, that's the choice as well. So, and it's a choice that we made for our family. And so far it's worked out really well.
Do you have children?
I do. I have 2 daughters.
And they are not in Montana.
Oh, they are. When we moved here, they were very small. We actually started our family late. My husband and I met later in life. And so when we moved here, my youngest was 3, and then my older daughter was 7. So they were quite young when we moved here. And of course, now I've got my oldest getting into college, and I'm still homeschooling a 8th grader.
Wow. How is that?
It is, it's wonderful in some ways, and in other ways it can be kind of a strain. And I'm being honest about that with other homeschooled families. I wouldn't change it. And I'm completely on board with the idea. And I homeschooled my other daughter. My husband helps. And I'm glad that we're doing it. But it is a commitment, especially when both of us each work independently our own jobs. And it's going to be a bit of a relief, I think, when we get her through the rest of her years and on to college herself.
I threaten my wife all the time with homeschooling our children. They're young. They're only like 2.5. I don't like the idea of public school at all. I don't think public school actually works other than like a prison or like babysitting for children. I think it's horrible.
Well, I'll tell you, I really like homeschooling for the idea that I'm able to set my own kind of curriculum. And I homeschooled my children with what's considered a classical education. And basically what that means is we really focused very heavily on reading and writing and grammar and literature, math and your higher sciences. I know that sounds typical, like, well, isn't that what they do in school? But they don't really anymore. And I've seen them excel and just blossom and turn into really on their way to become really very beautiful and valuable and giving women. So it is definitely worth it. And seeing them light up when they're working so hard on something and they get a concept. So seeing their growth and what they're able to achieve when they do really well, I just let them move forward. If they're struggling with something, we slow down and work on it. And I really do recommend it for any parents that are thinking about it. It's worked beautifully for us. And the scores for her college entrance exams are definitely proof that, what we were doing works. So if you're interested in it, I really recommend you look at it. It is a time commitment, but
yeah, that's the thing I worry about the most. Is I don't think I'm selfless
but it's a
enough.
Wonderful place. It's a wonderful place to put your time.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't think I'm selfless enough to do it. My wife was schooled in a wonderful program in a private school where they gave their students a lot of effort, a lot of time. I was schooled in a public school in Pasco County that couldn't have given, two poos whether or not I graduated or not. And I saw a lot of students flitter out and become criminals. I made it through because of football, and I barely know grammar to save my life, even though I really desperately want to be a writer. You know what I mean? I have programs that get me through it barely. I know a lot of successful people who were given the opportunity to educate themselves and didn't have any guidance whatsoever. I hate what's happening to the kids nowadays in the public school system.
It is, I have to agree with you. And it is a little bit disturbing, some of the things that I know I've been seeing and hearing. The girls do have friends that go to public schools, and some of them are better than others. And I also believe too, like you said, it's a lot to do with what the student and the parents put into it.
Yeah.
As well as what you're going to get out of school. You can either skate by, or as a student, you can even commit yourself to doing better. So it is a lot of an individual choice as well, the older you get.
Education is a lifetime achievement, and it doesn't have to take place between the ages of 6 and 18 years old. I'm stuck behind a desk bored. I mean, I drew a lot of dragons and barbarians during my time in high school. It was such a waste. What a waste of taxpayer money. I wish I could, I belong in some kind of repayment program for the little bit of effort I actually put forth. Play a lot of football and lift a lot of weights, but I'm pretty sure that the money that was spent on my education wasn't supposed to go towards that. But unfortunately.
The nice thing about homeschooling is, and you brought up an excellent point that I wanted to touch on, was the idea that not everything my daughters learned was behind a desk. Yes, we did spend a lot of time in that regard. However, we were also doing a lot of field trips and going to the library and seeing museums and going outside and just observing, for science example, going outside and observing nature and studying different plants. And
what a great place for that too, in Montana. I mean, the wilderness, the animals, they call it the big sky country. Oh my God, the night sky in Montana must be amazing for astronomy. The
It was.
Milky Way is probably stretched out up upon you. I mean, paleontology, I would imagine, would be amazing too. Weren't you underwater at some point as well?
Yes, in fact, we have the most fabulous dinosaur museum here, and it is in
Oh,
it's in
didn't,
Bozeman.
yeah. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful
And
state. I
we
would love to go through it.
Yeah, we took the girls to Bozeman there to the museum. That was fascinating. We have a wonderful program that teaches all about the constellations and things. What was very exciting was the other night, we all sat up till, oh gosh, 1 o'clock in the morning or so and watched the Northern Lights.
Oh, you have Northern Lights in Montana too? That is so fantastic.
Not often, but we did get a really nice evening where we had the stars out. You could see the pale blues and greens with the shimmering, almost like laser beams of light going through the sky, waves of light that looked like they were washing and waving. It was, I'm an author and I should have words to describe it.
Well, that's better that you don't, because then you would probably, you would diminish what actually was occurring. And I guess you really do put it in perspective for me too. Education can take place no matter where you are. You could be in a hut someplace, and as long as you have some imagination and make your children question their, their existence, you could educate.
It can be fun.
Yeah.
You can make it fun, and when it's fun, they want to learn. And I also know some people who don't necessarily have the kind of time that I do to put into it, but they still homeschool by using different types of programs online that you can buy. And they've been having success with that as well. So there's more than one way to achieve this. You don't necessarily have to do it the way I am. There's lots of different ways, and the homeschooling is growing in leaps and bounds. More and more students are being taught at home every year.
What about the socialization?
That is the one question that I get most often.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's really it's a non-issue. The girls did Girl Scouts and 4-H. They did programs at the library, creative writing clubs, art classes. So all of these things are available in the town that's not far from us. I can't tell you how many countless sleepovers and pizza parties and birthday parties and things that we hosted. I also throw a bang-up Halloween party. So they got plenty of socialization, and they learned how to get along and communicate with people of all ages at all times. They weren't necessarily in with a peer group in a classroom for 6 or 7 hours a day. That's true. However, they had plenty of time to socialize.
No, that's wonderful. How did you grow up? Was it homeschooled as well, or were you a product of the public school system?
No, I went through the public school system, and we moved quite a bit.
Oh.
So sometimes I was in a school. I might be in 2 schools in the same year.
Are you a military brat?
So I am not.
No.
It was just the way that my family happened to be structured, and so we ended up moving quite a bit. But
I'm a military brat, so I was everywhere.
So
no roots.
Yeah, you were everywhere.
No roots, no friendships that I got developed, and really had a hard time with that in my entire life. So homeschooling probably wouldn't. I read a lot, so my education came from others. Teachers were like, just shut up, let me read. Let me draw my dinosaurs and my dragons and barbarians, and you do your little blah 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 thing, and I'll read my book when I get home, because you guys aren't going to let me do that anyway.
So you probably would have been one of the students that did thrive in homeschooling. Personally, I wish I'd had these kinds of opportunities. I wish I could have grown up in the kind of lifestyle that I'm giving my girls, but it wasn't to be. And so, like you, I had similar instances where for a long time I thought my name was New Girl.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have one of those. I have one of those names that stick out too. Is like, what? What's your name? Yellow? No. Shut up. Don't talk to me. Yeah. So you moved around a lot. You're an artist, law enforcement. You live in big sky country. You're unfortunately not from there, and Montana's getting one of those reputations. The locals don't like the newcomers. Do you experience that, or have you experienced that kind of you know, I mean,
Have I been ostracized?
the ostracized, excuse me, my tongue does not want to work.
Oh, that, yeah. I have days like that too. More than I care to admit.
Every day. It's like, why am I on a podcast if I can't talk? But yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, I would have to say that yes, I have had my brush with those kinds of situations, and I tended to treat them with humor, and I actually did write about them in the book. The smaller towns, I think, tend to be more closed socially. The larger cities, like Bozeman's and Billings, I think it's a little easier there. And the West in itself, I think, has its own culture, almost a subculture of its own. And you probably know that from moving and living in different places. Didn't you find that in all the places you lived, there were certain characteristics of behavior?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed the western part of America. It seemed to be a lot more independent in terms of this is where we are. You can be someplace else.
And I love, yes, there is an element of that completely. And also, we're the best last place, so don't tell anyone about us.
Yeah.
And the West
Portland has that attitude, and they hate Portlandia because of it. No, shush. Don't come here. Don't come here.
The West itself is a very, they're full of very rugged individualists. And I think sometimes that's why you do get your authors and artists and things that enjoy this, not only for what we have to offer as far as the beauty of nature and what's around you, but the whole idea that when you come here, you're meant to learn how to be independent and take care of yourself.
Are there a lot of artists and writers that live in Montana in your area? Have you bumped into a lot of creative souls?
I wouldn't say necessarily in my area, but there are other parts of the state, I think, where they do tend to come together. So I don't know if the West will ever really find its place in that regard, again, because of the idea of it being so wild. And in fact, on my videos, I have this little entry that talks about life in the modern Wild West. Mm-hmm. Because in many ways, Montana is still the Wild West and part of almost the last frontier, unless you're looking at maybe Alaska.
It's very curious to me because obviously I have family in Appalachia, West Virginia area, and I go through there and I see these little towns, and you know they're dying in a way. There aren't a lot of people there that are young, and when you look at them, they seem to be hurting bad. There are cars and there are people shopping, and the parking lots are filled with cars, and I wonder where they're getting their money. Where are they working? I think Montana's the same way. How are people earning a living? What are the jobs out in Montana right now? Are they all farmers? Are there mines out there? I mean, where is the money coming from?
Well, we do have some mines, yes, that work. There was coal, and what we're finding now is a shift in mindset. And as technology continues to improve, we're finding now that some of the younger people are coming back to where they grew up from. You're right. A lot of them leave. They leave to get jobs. But we're finding that with telecommuting and being able to do your jobs over the internet, and even hooking in with some of the larger corporations, they don't really care where you live. And so you can still make really excellent money, but move out to a place that's probably not as rural as I am, but still be able to have good internet communications, and you can do your job from there. So it's going to be really interesting to see Montana evolve over the next decade or so and see exactly where that technology takes us.
So Boise is not really a small town, but it's becoming more of a tech hub right now, a communications hub. It's got at least some technical support jobs coming into it, just south of you anyway, or southwest.
I could say the same about Coeur d'Alene, even though it's much smaller. I'm finding that it's also growing in that regard, that people are coming in with more of the textile types of jobs. So, you know, the West is changing too. I mean, time's always going to march forward,
The
and
interesting
it'll
thing
be
is about
interesting.
your place of birth, Detroit, is turning into an artist hub.
I am thrilled with the idea that Detroit is making a comeback.
Yeah, me too.
It was so sad to see what happened to Detroit.
Yeah.
And even though I left there when I was about 10 or so, I still have some really great memories about going downtown. And J.L. Hudson's store and the big department stores, that was your big afternoon out, and you got dressed in your Sunday clothes to go down to the store and see everything that was there and have lunch, and it was a big deal. So there was a lot of also cultural type things in Detroit, and it was a beautiful city. And you know, when it literally fell into ruins, it was heartbreaking. But now, like you said, I've heard really great things about it coming back. So I hope it's successful.
You know, it's very interesting to me is the 70s and even some of the 80s. New York City was dying. You know, it was bankrupt. It was horrible. You know, it's very popular now to go online and you see websites devoted to the horribleness that was New York City. You know, rampant homelessness and crime, and the subways are covered with graffiti and prostitution and just porno theaters and in Times Square. And, you know, Donald Trump, this person that's in the White House right now, who I didn't vote for, and I really don't even appreciate as a human being, came in and really cleaned it up a lot, right? And our cities are dying. There are certain cities that, like New Orleans and Detroit and other places, that are kind of bankrupt and not making any money. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump comes in the White House, and all this road construction outside on 46, which is the main drag in New Jersey that heads right to the cities, getting all this construction. And starting to think, like, even though he's twittering all this horrible stuff and people are ridiculing him, it's like, dude's doing stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I haven't, you know, to be honest, it's been a long time since I've been in New York. I haven't been back to the East Coast in a while, and I think New York City has so much to offer. And from, you know, I didn't realize it was having the problems it was. So I'm glad to hear that things are changing and that it's continuing to, you know, to be more of an uplifting place rather than, again, watch it go down that path of ruin. And if somebody can slow that down or even stop it, I think that's wonderful news to hear.
I'm saying America, though, too. I mean, I just hate to see this country fall into some kind of just cesspool of hate. I hate it so much when, I mean, you're on Twitter, you're on social media. We're both on this journey to earning some kind of following with our writing and getting people to listen to us with the things that we have to say. And it just seems like people hate each other, calling each other names like Nazi this or that, or, you know, at each other's throat. It's so, we're so desperate to be heard. And I would just hate to see Detroit falling into ruin, or New Orleans falling into ruin, or cities being destroyed because of lack of development. It seems like Americans themselves are being destroyed because of lack of development. And I don't know what the answers are, but I want to see that changed.
Well, you're right, and And I don't have those kinds of answers either.
I don't either.
basically,
I was like
know,
halfway through my statement going, okay, what's your question here? You don't have
well,
one. Just stop.
well, you were just musing out loud, which is fine. But I see, basically, what I see is societies they run in cycles.
Yeah.
And if you've watched them, that comment about history repeating itself, um, it usually does. And you seem to have a peak and then a decline, and then you build yourself back up. And so if you really look back over history and society in general, you'll see that. And at some point in time, I think you're always on the upswing, or maybe even a little bit on decline. I've rarely seen anything just static. So what I try to do with my work is to just stay above that and focus on offering something to people that is inspiring and uplifting. And I try to do that with my art. I try to build them a connection to either an emotion or the animal itself, something that they can connect to that means something to them, or triggers a memory, or makes them wish they were, oh, I wish I could see that animal in person, or gee, I wish I could be standing right there in the middle of the woods looking at it, kind of get them out of their life for a minute. And the same thing with the writing. I try to write, a main theme in the book is hope.
Hope.
And that's what I try to offer to people, is hope of the idea that find what you do well, find what you like, find how you want to live, and get out there and give it a try. And if you get knocked down a few times, just try to look at it in a humorous way, learn from it, get up and try again. And in the book, you'll see me and my family do that time and time, And since they're true stories, maybe somebody can glean something from that.
You hope to get knocked down, actually, because if you don't get knocked down, you're never going to learn what it feels like to get back up, to get your feet underneath yourself and to push, because that's what life's all about, isn't it? Learning what it's like to dust yourself off and to try it again, right?
I completely agree with that. And I think someone is done a disservice if they always win.
Yeah. What's that called? Influenza? Man, I was looking at your Twitter account, and I guess I haven't followed you. I just did. And there's a picture over here of a puma or a panther. It's like somebody just retweeted you, I think. Scat cat or something like that. It's a beautiful
That's
picture.
right. I did that drawing of the cougar that comes to our place and really enjoys our swing set.
Scary.
I have to tell you that, yeah, for some reason, the girl swings, it's a cougar magnet, and they like to come there. So I decided I never can get a photograph. I'm just not that fast. And they often come at night. So I decided to draw him. So yes, I know which one you are referencing, and that is my drawing of our cougar.
It just made me think, it's beautiful art, by the way, and
Thank you.
Really have a nice hand or eye, whichever one I'm supposed to say, but it really is gorgeous. And it also made me think
they work together.
They work together. Makes me think of, did you see the video of the two guys? I think they were on a trail in California, and they were following this panther. Maybe not even panther, maybe it was a cougar, and they were being dumb. They were just following it, thinking, oh, there's a wild animal, let's record it on our phones. And they rounded this corner thinking, oh, we're just going to continue to record it. And you're being sneaky. They took the camera and they followed it around this rocky bend, and the animal was gone. And they tilted the camera up, and it was standing on top of this rocky cliff looking at them. And it kind of reared up on its back legs like it was going, like, hey, guys, guess what? I'm 200 pounds of rock solid muscle, and I'm just going to sit here for a second and decide which of the two of you I'm going to jump on and destroy their throats. The wild animals of this world intimidate the living poo out of me. I can't stand the idea of being eaten alive. I mean, death is going to happen to all of us. But
idea either. Yeah, I really don't like that idea either.
I mean, I love wildlife. I loved when I lived in the Appalachian Mountains, when I lived in the Smoky Mountains, actually, I would sit there on a rocky, outcropping, and I would just listen to the hush, which is like this wind that just doesn't stop, right? I mean, but it sounds like it's hushed. And I would think beneath me in this little carpeting of evergreens, there's just so much animal death, pain and suffering and hunting and predatorial behavior happening, but it's so quiet. And just there beneath me is just so much pain and suffering, but it's so beautiful at the same time. I'd love to live in a situation like that if I was like invisible or invincible. One or the other is fine.
Well, everything you just described, truthfully, is the natural world, and
Right.
everything has to eat, and so your food chain and your animals that are higher up on the food chain, of course, are usually the ones that are the meat eaters. They're going to prey upon the smaller animals. There's a lot of animals that just eat the vegetation. It's an entire cycle of life, and you're right. Sometimes it can be quite brutal.
Yeah. So I mean, what is your plans going forward? Are you working on a following? Are you working on your social media marketing? I know you said you're working on your second novel, which is a continuation of your family's journey in big sky country, Montana.
Mm-hmm. I am working on the sequel, and of course, I'm hoping to have that out pretty soon. The social media is something that I do work on. I do consider it more or less part of my job. So you won't find me on it all the time during the day, but it is an important part of a way that I can connect with people. And I really enjoy hearing from them through Facebook or getting the emails on my website, different things. And so that's one of the aspects about being an author that I really love is being able to hear people's opinions and answer their questions. And so I do devote a good portion of my day to make sure that everybody gets an answer.
No, that's interesting. So you're constantly interacting with your followers and talking back.
Mm-hmm.
How did you discover Emma Hardcastle?
Let me think about that for a minute. Actually, I saw one of her interviews with another author who I became friends with. And so that's how we ended up connecting, and we seemed to hit it off. And she asked me to do an interview with her, and it was great fun.
Yeah,
So she's a great gal.
Yeah, I like her. She's fun and she's a hard worker. She has an idea of how marketing is supposed to work, and she's really followed through with it. She's done a lot of my second podcast, Mirage, where we speculate on speculative fiction. I'm so happy that she hooked us up. I'm happy that I got to talk to you.
I am too. I think it's wonderful. I've really enjoyed our conversations today.
And well, I finish up this podcast with 3 questions. Hold on one second.
Mm-hmm.
The first one comes off a little rough. I'm constantly trying to workshop how to ask it the best way. But as an artist, as somebody who's been kind of working, her imagination on paper or in words her entire life, how do you suggest a new artist, a neophyte, as somebody who's struggling to create, who wants to create, who wants to put images and words down, but is struggling? How do you suggest they find that portion of themselves and recreate it?
I think the first thing in any of the creative arts and in any creative process, you have to look at, how do I want to express myself? So, for example, like you said, do you want to be an artist? Do you actually want to paint or draw? Or would you rather write and become an author? First, you have to pick, I suppose, what medium you want to work in. And all of that comes from what feels right for you, what you're really interested in, sort of what your heart's telling you to do, because I don't think that it will steer you wrong. And then once you decide on where you want to go, for example, okay, I really want to write. I'm finding that is where my heart is. That's what I enjoy. Hours and hours of time pass by and I don't even realize it. I'm so involved in my work. First, you have to build your basic tools or your basic skills, which is working on your sentence structure and your paragraph structure and your grammar. Those are all things that if you want to be a writer, you're going to have to craft. So I would say then find your skills and the skill set needed in that and work on them. And then your creative process will really do the rest. And you'll find that the ideas will flow once you have some basic tools to work with.
And my great-grandmother, who lived to 99 years old and 364 days before passing, said before she died, pick something and be good at it. And I think that is excellent advice. It really, really honestly is.
I think she's right. And she said it in a much more concise way than I did.
She didn't have a lot of time left. She was very concise at the end. And she did really, at the end, all she did was stare out the window at the neighborhood. She had her Bible in her hands and she just looked out this window with this look on her face. Like she just couldn't wait. I mean, 99 years is a long time.
Oh,
you know
it is.
I mean?
Imagine all that she had seen and experienced.
I used to ask her and she didn't want to tell me anything. I used to beg her for answers, and she saw so much. I mean, she lived in Appalachia, coal country.
Mm-hmm.
All the abuses she had gone through as a woman in that time, it was horrible. She had, unfortunately, her husband was so mean to her, and people were mean to her husband, and I can't rate. I wish I could write her story, but I think that'd just be wrong. I don't know.
Well, especially if you don't know it.
Yeah, exactly. She wouldn't tell me. She wouldn't. My grandmother's the same way. She keeps her mouth shut as well. It's like, man, ladies, you have such a great story to tell. People would love to hear it. No, it's none of your business. Okay, fine. My second question is, what are you reading?
Well, to be honest, I haven't had a whole lot of time for it, but in the evening, in the evenings sometimes my husband and I have a really nice way to end our evening, and we choose a book together and he reads to me out loud.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that nice? And so right now we're reading a true story called Dakota Cowboy, and it was set in the late 1800s, and it's about moving cattle and in South Dakota, and what the real cowboys went through, and the hardships that they were experiencing living through the winters and trying to move these cattle and keep track of them. So it's very interesting. But yes, we also enjoy mystery stories. We like to read Sherlock Holmes and some of the other mysteries, and so we just kind of take the last hour or so of the evening, and we have a nice chair that the both of us can fit in, like a love seat, and it overlooks the back, which is where the moon comes up. It's very pretty. And he reads to me in the evenings.
Is that and you draw, I imagine, or you work your art, or do you just sit there and enjoy your husband's voice and just relax?
Yes, that is my time off. And so I just sit back and I listen to him read, and sometimes he stops and we talk a little bit or comment about the story. And it's just a nice way for both of us to calm down.
Well, that is the most romantic thing I've ever heard on this podcast, and you're episode number 62. So I imagine that says a lot.
Oh, well, that's really sweet. Thanks. Oh, and if that inspires you, we still hold hands when we watch television.
No, that makes me ill. That's horrible. Well, I held my wife's hand last night or this morning. I held it once this week, at least. At one point the last year we held hands. No, I held her hand once or twice. Anyway, you make me feel bad. I'm gonna hold her hand tonight, I think.
I'm sure she'll appreciate it.
I'm gonna be more romantic. I'm gonna read to her tonight, I think. My last question. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please. I was gonna ask my last question, but I wanted to hear what you wanted to say.
Oh, I was just gonna say that since I've mentioned that to a couple of people, I've had some emails come in that said, "Oh, that was such a great idea, and my wife and I picked a book," and and I read it to her, and she just thought it was wonderful. And so who knows, maybe I'll start a new trend.
Yeah, well, let your husband know he's made me feel very guilty. So there's that.
I'll pass that on.
My last question would be, where can we find you on the World Wide Web so people can interact with you?
Well, there's actually a lot of places that you can find me. My website is quinnwildlifeart.com. And you can also find me through Hellgate Press, which is the publisher. And Facebook, I have a public business page that you don't necessarily have to be a member of Facebook to participate in, so you can find that. And of course, I do have the Twitter account. And you can find me in most any bookstore as well. So and my YouTube channel, I forgot to mention that. I've started putting together some videos of our Western experience. And, you know, when you were mentioning the looking out, I have some videos of some really gorgeous, I did a sunset video and all the views were taken from the front porch. A wildlife video that you can see the different animals that share our homestead here. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I think you'll enjoy them. They're short, they're only a few minutes a piece, so they're not a huge time investment, but they're really enjoyable.
I think you should put more wildlife videos up here. That would be wonderful, just to see what else comes on your property, and more cooking videos, and maybe some more artist videos of you drawing. Just do what you got to do.
Well, you know, I just started the videos only a couple of months ago. I think I only have 7 or 8 of them up, but we're turning one of the rooms here, an extra bedroom in the house, into a filming studio. So I'm hoping I can get some more out there as quickly as possible.
Well, you're living an interesting life, and you know, just talking with you, the imagination does run wild, and I think that's great. You make me think of, you know, pioneers and doing interesting things, and you know, getting out there and exploring and just living a great life. Your kids are lucky, you're lucky, your husband's lucky, and you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of your writing career. And you know, when your second book publishes, let me know, and we'll have you back on just to have another conversation about life and writing and art and whatnot.
Well, I would love that. Thank you. I am much obliged, and I would love to come back and talk to you again.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on, and thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Brian.
You have a great day.
You too.